So today's video is going to be ranking all of my palettes that I tried in the year of 2023 so far. I really love doing this video. This is now my second year doing it. I started doing it last year, even though I thought I started doing this like 2 years ago, but apparently I only saw one from last year. So I'm going to be counting down all the palettes I've tried this year. So I tried a total, I believe, of 14 palettes in the first half of the year. So remember when I said I was going to try and keep my palette purchases down? And I am kind of doing that, where I was only purchasing one palette per month again, but then it kind of got a little bit more out of hand as the months went on, and I was getting like 2 to 3 palettes. So by the way, if my eyes don't really match the rest of my face, I don't really care. I'm wearing like this mustardy look today, and everything else is kind of peachy, but that's okay. So we have some new brands, and we have some repurchased brands that I love their eyeshadow formulas dearly. So let's just get started. But number 14, I'm very sad to put this one here because really I didn't really try any dud palettes except for this one, but it's really only an issue with the quality of the mattes in this palette. And this is one of my favorite eyeshadow brands. I have 8 palettes from this brand now. So number 14 is the Odin's Eye and Makeup Just for Fun Flora Story palette. Now my issue with this palette is that the color story is stunning. That makes perfect sense to say the issue is the color. It's not the color story. My issue with this palette, this smells a little weird, is the mattes. The shimmers in here are absolutely stunning. They're the quality of the shimmers that I expect from Odin's Eye. They're super beautiful. But these mattes are so ridiculously powdery and dusty that I just cannot get them to blend. Like, especially the purple shades. Like, these 2 purple shades are so hard to blend. It's kind of like similar to the experience that I had with the ColourPop All Amethyst palette. That one was like the worst palette I've ever tried from ColourPop, and I sold that one. But then like people were saying that it was a quality issue with that palette, and some people absolutely loved theirs and other people didn't like it. I feel like that's an issue with this palette, but at the same time, like, Odin's Eye is such a beloved brand from many influencers, and everybody was like, oh, this palette was great. The only person that I saw that had an issue with this palette was Karen Harris, and she said that she had the same blending issue with this dark purple shade, Orchid, that it really just was not blending, and I could see it when she was using it in her video, that it just was not deepening up, it was not blending out. So that is my issue with this palette that makes me hesitant to use it and reach for it, because it's like, I love Makeup Just for Fun. I watch her channel. I really do love her videos, and I understand like her concept with this palette, that it's supposed to be easy. You don't really have to think about it too much. You have the looks laid out for you with like the 2 green mattes and the 2 green shimmers, or the 2 purples and the purple, and then this beautiful multi-chrome, and then this really stunning like turquoisey shade. Again, the shimmers are absolutely stunning, but the mattes, I just have such a hard time blending them. I even like cleaned my brushes off, like wash them completely, like with my Sephora soap, and tried to use my brushes clean the next day, because 99% of the time I'm just spraying it with a spot cleaner, and I still could not get these to blend. So that is my only issue. I think that the shimmers are beautiful though, and I'm going to swatch my favorite shade from each palette. I think my favorite shade is the Lilac Magnolia shade. This is such a stunning like lilac-y shimmer. It's so pretty. I just wish I could get the mattes to work, because the shimmers are absolutely stunning. So that is my biggest issue with this palette. And if you guys want to see this palette in action, I do have first impressions on all the palettes that I'm talking about, but unfortunately just it was a huge quality issue for me with the matte shades. Sorry. Why is that tissue now falling? So that is number 14. Okay, number 13 is a ColourPop palette. And this is mostly a color story issue for me. The quality is actually pretty good in this palette. So number 13 is the ColourPop Alice in Wonderland palette. Now, originally this was going to be the one that I was actually going to rank the lowest because I actually just am not a fan of this color story. The packaging is adorable. Absolutely love how small and compact it is. I actually freaking love that. It's just, when I saw this color story revealed, I was like, that's a little confusing because I don't understand why they paired this black sparkly matte with the rest of these like super mid-tone pastel-y mattes that barely show up even on me. But these 4 shades actually show up pretty well, but this orange is so pale. It barely even shows up on me. I could not get it to be this color when I tried to use it and like use it as a crease shade and use it with the green. I always end up going for this shade to use with the green or the pink but like there's no like starting crease shades in this palette because they're all not just so pale, but they're very hard to pair together because unless you do like the blue with the blue shimmer, the pink with the pink shimmer, and the green with the green shimmer, like what else is going to go together, you know? Like, and I'm not saying that like palettes always have to be like super easy for the user to use, but if you are a ColourPop collector or a Disney collector, or you're first starting with ColourPop and you really want to purchase something from like a Disney collab because it's like one of your favorite Disney movies, I just feel like that this color story is very challenging for someone to use. Like even for me that's been using makeup for like at least since I was 16 years old, but I really started collecting makeup when I was 27, so it's been like at least 7 or almost 8 years at this point. It's just very hard for me to come up with a look with this palette, but when I actually did use this palette and did the looks that I came up with, I actually really liked how they looked. And they lasted such a long time on the eyes. And the shimmers in here are stunning. The mattes, again, are a little bit powdery, but once you put the shimmers on in this palette, you kind of just forget about the mattes. But again, these mattes blend out way better than the ones in the Oden's Eye palette. So that's why I ranked this one a little bit higher. I definitely prefer the color story of the Flora Story palette more. Just this one is just much easier to use quality-wise. But I also wish that they would have just put like a dark blue in here. Like this shade was not necessary and neither was this shade. I know they always put some type of grounding neutral matte shade in every palette that they do. I get that, but not when they don't go with any of the other shades in the palette. Like they usually come up with more cohesive color stories, especially with the Disney collabs, but the quality of the shimmers are so good. So my favorite shade in the palette is the shade Down the Rabbit Hole. It's such a stunning gold blue duochrome. It is so beautiful. I actually just recently used this shade again on Sunday and it just looks so beautiful on the eyes. But yeah, again, my issue is the mattes in this palette. So yeah, that is number 13. I haven't really been that impressed with any ColourPop palettes that have come out this year, to be honest. And I've only gotten 3 ColourPop palettes the first half of this year. Most of the other palettes are other brands. So that one is number 13. And then number 12 is another ColourPop palette. I think that this palette is really good, actually. So this is the ColourPop Flirty Talk palette. So that one I put at number 12. And this one I actually thought was going to be like my perfect pink palette. Again, I also love the packaging of this. How cute is that? It like opens up like a Dear Diary kind of. And this is what the color story looks like. And I think this color story is beautiful. And again, the quality and the lasting power of this palette is so good. Lasts just as long as the Alice in Wonderland shadows, but these mattes are more pigmented, like insanely pigmented, and they blend out so well. My only issue, well, the first thing is that the shade Just My Type is kind of like a dud shade. It is a super shock, but for some reason it just doesn't apply to the lid as smoothly as some of their other Super Shocks do, but I've been kind of noticing that in their newer palettes that they have a Super Shock in, they're not really the same smooth quality as they were in like the older palettes. But it's still a really pretty shade, but I still need to try this shade without a glitter glue because honestly, I don't really need to use a glitter glue when I use a Super Shock shadow because they're a cream dip. They're like a cream shadow, so like you don't really need to use a glitter glue to help it adhere to the lid because it already has like a creamier texture. But that was my issue with it, is that it wasn't really laying smoothly over my glitter glue, but I still haven't had a chance to try it again. But I had re-dipped into this palette a couple of times in the springtime because I really wanted to use it to create some other pink looks. And they're just beautiful. These mattes are so richly pigmented on the eyes. But what I wish is that they kind of would have replaced these two shades, especially this one. They could have put like a more like mid-toned hot pink in here and kind of took this shade out of here. And I feel like that would have been way better because this shade is a little bit too dark for me to use as a brow bone highlight. And it's also too light for me to use in the crease. So I kind of don't even use that shade really. But the shade On Your Mind is a really beautiful white brow bone highlight. So, and these shimmers are so beautiful. I love all the shimmers in this palette. They just are so beautiful on the lids. And again, the mattes are so good in this palette. So I'm really glad that ColourPop finally released a pink palette that's actually a pink palette because so many brands come out with pink palettes, but they're not really pink. They'll have like one pink shade or one mauve shade and the rest of it will be neutral, or the rest of it will be full of like things that go with pink, but they aren't pink. So this one is like the closest palette that I've seen from ColourPop or honestly any other brand that comes close to the pink color story that I want, because I love pink eyeshadows. So yeah, so I don't regret getting this at all. So my favorite shade in the palette is the excuse me, is the multi-chrome glitter in here, or I think it's called the pearlescent glitter in the shade Be Mine. It's so gorgeous. It's like a pinky blue glittery shimmer, and it like shifts from like blue to pink. It's so beautiful. I absolutely love that shade. And again, the mattes in here are beautiful, rich, and pigmented, but y'all know I love my shimmers. Y'all know every single shade that's going to be my favorite shade is going to be a shimmer in every palette. But yeah, this was a really good palette, so I kind of understand, and I love this palette way more than the Secret Admirer palette that it came out with last year for, oh, why am I holding it upside down? For Valentine's Day. This one is 10 times better quality-wise and color story-wise. The Secret Admirer one was so powdery, and I was like, oh, this might be the pink palette that I really thought that I needed, but this one is so much better. So I really, really like the quality of this palette. It's so, so good. So, yeah. Okay, number 11 is another Oden's Eye palette, and these are the only two Oden's Eye palettes that I picked up this year. I wasn't sure if I was going to pick up Oden's Eye's palettes this year, but then these influencer collab palettes came out, and I absolutely love this influencer, so I had to get her palette. And originally I was only going to get the Makeup Just for Fun's palette, but then I was like, but I love Baddie Bean too, so I have to get hers. But hers is much better quality-wise. So this is the Oden's Eye and Baddie Bean Planet Spirit palette. Again, the packaging is so freaking adorable on these palettes. I really love the packaging on both of these. They're so nice and compact and sleek. So this is what the palette looks like. And then when you open it up, this is the palette. Why is this bothering me? So this is what it looks like. And this palette is such a punchy, beautiful, poppy, in-your-face summer color story. Just like these mattes are so pigmented and the shimmers are absolutely stunning on the lids. Every single shade performs beautifully. I don't have that same powdery issue with any of the mattes in this palette. They perform exactly the way that Oden's Eye mattes are supposed to perform, pigmented and beautiful and blendable. And again, the shimmers in here are absolutely stunning. So I just absolutely love these poppy mattes. They are so punchy on the eyes. The only thing is that the reason why I rank this one a little bit lower is that there's nothing wrong quality-wise, and I love the looks that I create out of it. I just feel like I'm missing something because there's only 10 shades in here, so sometimes I have to pull from like another palette to like deepen it up. But also these shades are so pigmented that like you only need to use like 2 of the mattes. And if you put it like on the outer corners, like you do like with these kind of palettes, sometimes I'll put it in the defining area and also the outer corners, and it deepens it up just enough. Like I used this red shade like that with the orange, and those were the 2 mattes that I used in my first impressions of this palette. And they were so pigmented and rich that I didn't even need to deepen it up with a brown shade. So it's a beautiful palette. I really, really love the quality of this. And I think my favorite shade in here is the shade Familiar, because this is such a stunning, like tealy green, beautiful shimmer. And it's just so stunning. So that one is Familiar. It's such a gorgeous green. I've only used this one once. I haven't really been able to re-dip into either of these palettes. I would really like to use this palette more so in the summertime because I really do want to whip this out in the summer. I only got to use it like 1 or 2 more times in the springtime because these palettes came out back in February, but I mostly picked it up because I wanted to get one of Baddie Bean's collaborations because I really do love her channel, and I just thought this color story was perfect, and it's just so beautiful. I just have to swatch one of the mattes for you guys. They're insanely pigmented. Like, look at that. Look at how vibrant that orange is. Like, are you kidding me? And that's how they show up on the eyes. Like, that's not even like 2 swipes in the pan. They're just so richly pigmented. So yeah, this palette was really, really good. So that one is number 11. Okay, so number 10 is the last ColourPop palette that I'm going to be sharing, because after that, everything else is not ColourPop, because again, I only picked up 3 ColourPop palettes this year. So number 10 is the ColourPop and Snow White palette. This is the Dreams Come True palette. I actually liked this palette more so than I thought I was going to. And originally, I didn't think I was going to pick up this palette, but then I absolutely loved like, they really have been sucking me in with their Disney packaging this year, because I didn't want to get the Alice palette. I thought that this palette was much more cohesive color story-wise. Like, all the shades that they put in here made so much more sense, but the packaging of this, so adorable. But I was going to skip over it because I was like, do I necessarily really need it? But then again, do we necessarily need any eyeshadow palettes? No. I probably only need 1 or 2 or 3 palettes, and that's it. But this is what the color story looks like. This color story makes absolute sense on why they did these colors for Snow White, because they literally are pale Snow White shades, and then we have a yellow, we have a blue, we have a red. And that goes exactly with the colors of her dress. Everybody knows what Snow White looks like at this point. My issue with this is that there's no like deepening colorful shades like for the blue and for the red. I kind of wish that they would have like swapped out these 2 pale colors, because like they do that a lot in their palettes where they put 2 pale neutrals. Oh my god, I'm sorry. Whoops. Sorry about that. That they put 2 pale neutrals in their palettes, and then they expect everybody to use them, like no matter what skin tone you are. And that kind of like just annoys me, but also like I've been noticing that trend a lot in their Disney palettes recently, and like with their older Disney palettes, I felt like that wasn't always what they did. So, but I think the shimmers in here are really beautiful, and I think the matte quality is really, really good. And out of the 3 color stories that I got from ColourPop this year, this one is my favorite, because when I actually started using this palette, I was reaching for this one a lot more than the other 2. So I've used this palette a decent amount, and the shimmers in here are really beautiful as well. But I have to say my favorite shade is the yellow gold shade because it's just such a beautiful gold. And again, y'all know I am such a sucker for shimmers and for golds, but look at how pigmented this gold is. Do you see that? Do you see how opaque that is? Like, I was like, ColourPop, you really stepped up your metallics. Like, look at that. That is super pretty. So, my only issue is that I wish that they would kind of, I understand that since she's Snow White, that it's going to be paler colors, but even these two colors for me, this one kind of shows up okay, but this one is a great brow bone highlight for me, but this one is not pigmented enough for me to use sometimes. It's not, I wish it was like a bit more orangey, and then I feel like a lot more people will be able to use it. I think the bottom half of the palette is a really good color story, and anybody could use these shades because I feel like these are more mid-tone browns and they can show up on deeper skin tones. But yeah, and then the Super Shock in here as well isn't really the greatest quality anyway, but it is a really pretty shade. I definitely prefer this one over the one in the Flirty Talk palette. And then this shimmery white is so opaque and beautiful. So again, shimmer quality is really good, and the blue and the red are also really good too, and the rest of the matte quality is very good as well. There is a bit of kick up when I use it, but it doesn't really affect the way that the mattes blend whatsoever in this palette. So I think that this is a good quality palette from ColourPop. Again, usually their Disney collab palettes are, much higher quality, or their collab palettes in general. So yeah, it's a good palette. Okay. So number 9 is the most recent palette to my collection. And I'm just going to tell you guys right now that I have picked up every single Nomad palette this year. I have picked up all 3 palettes that they have released. But with this palette, I wasn't as impressed with this palette as I thought I was going to be. But I am wearing it on my eyes today. And this was actually the last shimmer that I had to test out in this palette. So now I have officially tested out every single shimmer in all of these palettes. So what better time to film my ranking for you guys for the very last day of June that I finished testing out this palette. So I just thought that was a funny coincidence. So number 9 is the Nomad Okavango Safari palette. And even though I've used this for the past 2 days, I thought like my, opinion would change a little bit more, but I think that where it lands is where it needs to land for me. First off, the packaging is absolutely gorgeous, and I absolutely love the leopard print packaging on the outside. It's really, really nice. It's kind of soft, but it's really, really nice quality. I like that it's lightweight, but also like so it does not feel cheap whatsoever. So this is what the color story looks like. I really do love this color story. It's just, I felt like a little bored with this palette. I don't know what it is. And you know what's funny is that I was dying for Nomad to come out with a more neutral palette, because like with the Hudson Valley palette, I really like that palette as well. But again, it's kind of boring for me because there's only 3 shimmers in that palette. So I was like, ooh, we're getting, more options with this palette. We're getting more shimmer options, but I can notice a quality difference with this palette as compared to the other 2 palettes that I've used from Nomad this year. A lot of people were saying that the mattes are kind of thin, they're a little bit powdery, and the shimmers are very hard pressed in this palette. With some of the mattes in this palette, they are a bit powdery, and they're a little bit harder to blend. But once you build them up and you finish your look, it always turns out really, really pretty. I just had some issues blending some of the browner shades, like these ones on top, like this really light shade doesn't really show up that well, but the rest of them perform pretty well. It was mostly the shimmers that I wasn't really wowed by in this palette. I'm like, even though they have like these fun imprints on them and designs and stuff, when you put them on your lid, they're just a basic shimmer. They're pretty, but I think my favorite shimmer is the shade Nile Crocodile because it shows up beautifully. But when I did the green look with this palette, that look was my favorite look that I did in this palette. And what's funny is that maybe I prefer Nomad for their colorful palettes. rather than their neutral palettes, because I don't know, I'm just not like excited about this palette that much. I really like the look that I did yesterday though, because I used the silver and I used some of the like deeper, cooler tone shades, and it turned out really pretty. But again, I don't know, I just feel like I want more with this palette sometimes. I'm like, it's not something that I couldn't create with any other palette. But again, the green look was definitely my favorite. So, I don't know. I just wasn't like really that thrilled with it. But it's still a good palette. Like, if you want to get it, I wouldn't say don't get it. But when I'm swatching the shimmers, I can feel that they are harder pressed and they feel a little bit, just a little bit, I don't know, just not the same quality that Nomad really is known for. So that is the shade Nile Crocodile, and that is definitely my favorite shade in the palette. It's a really, really pretty, like, yellowish green shade. It's really pretty, and it reflects, like, goldish green. It's a stunning shade. So, again, I still really like it. Do not regret buying it at all. I'm just a little bit bored with it. I guess because I have such high expectations for Nomad now because I've picked up every single palette this year. And also, this is my 6th Nomad palette in my collection. So, yeah, I really have fallen in love with the brand. So, what I'm wearing today is I used Marami Game Reserve in the crease. Then I darkened up the crease more with the shade Elusive Leopards. And then I used the shade Pack of Wild Dogs on my outer corners. And then I took a tiny bit of Honking Hippos just to make it a bit deeper. And then for the lid shade, I used the shade Keystone Termites. And this one is a really pretty shimmer as well. It's kind of like a bronzy yellowish gold. It's very pretty. It's kind of like an antique-y gold. And then for my inner corners, I used the shade Leaping Leeches just to pick up a bit of the peachiness on my shirt. And that's everything that I used from the palette today. So again, it's pretty. Am I super blown away by it? No. Do I regret having it? No. I just know Nomad is, they can do so much better. That's why, like, I'm a little bit, like, it's good, but I'm not wowed. But it's still a really nice palette, so. Alright, so number 8 is a brand that I gave a second chance to because they were running a free shipping promo earlier this year. So I picked this palette up back in April. And this is the Ace Beauté Aura palette. Now, I was actually eyeing this palette when it came out last year with the green and blue palette. I forgot what the name was of that palette. But I just think this color story is so unique. This is like a color story like that I can get down with because I think my favorite kind of palettes now are neutral palettes with colorful shades, like kind of half neutral, half colorful palettes. Like there's like 5 neutral shades in this palette and then like 6 colorful shades, but these colorful shades are kind of like for people that don't love using color, but they can kind of dip into color with these purples and these reds, and they are so beautiful. I definitely prefer the quality of the Ace Beauté palettes on their website as compared to the palettes that are in the BoxyCharm boxes, because that is not the same quality. Because my first experience with trying Ace Beauté was trying one of their BoxyCharm palettes because somebody sent me one of their BoxyCharm palettes because she didn't want to use it. So she sent it to me and I didn't like it at all. Like the mattes were so dry and the shimmers were like, eh. But the shimmers in here are so metallic and smooth and buttery and shiny and beautiful. And the mattes blend so well. They're so rich. And this is what I'm talking about with a cohesive color story for all different skin tones, because Ace Beauté is a Black-owned brand. But anybody could use this palette. Anyone. So, ColourPop, I'm talking to you. Not like they're going to watch this video or anything. Anyway, my favorite shade in the palette is the shade Halo. This is such a stunning lavender gold shade. It's so beautiful. So that is definitely my favorite shade in this palette. And they're just such smooth metallics. And they definitely feel more smooth and metallic than the Nomad ones do. And I just created so many pretty looks with this palette, and I want to use it a bit more. I mean, I've used all the shades, but the only shade that I wish that maybe they could have made it like a kind of deep purple shimmer, that would have been really pretty, is this shade Gleam. It kind of doesn't go with the rest of the palette, but I kind of understand why they put it in here, because it's kind of like their pop shade in here. Like when you're like looking at a palette, like you're kind of drawn to at least one shade. And I feel like that one is like kind of the one you get drawn to. And then I have to swatch this red. This red is so gorgeous. Look at how rich that and pigmented that is. That is crazy. And look at that. It's such a gorgeous, like, deep red. I absolutely love red eyeshadow, too. I love doing red looks. And when I did the red look with this palette, I used this shade and then this shade and some of these neutral mattes, and it looks so beautiful. So, yeah, I really do like the quality of this palette, and I'm glad I finally got to try and give Ace Beauté another chance, because I think this palette is beautiful. So that one is number 8. Okay, number 7 is the first new brand to me that I had tried this year, and everyone was raving about this palette and this brand. So number 7 is the Glaminatrix Nearly Natural palette. Now, originally this palette was ranked a bit higher before I got some of the other palettes that I got later in the year, like added to my collection. This was also the first palette that I got in 2023, because with Glaminatrix, this palette kept on selling out. This is their highest selling palette, their most sold palette in their entire brand history. But this palette constantly would be selling out because people love neutrals, but they also love super shiny metallic shades, like myself. So this kind of reminds me of Give Me Glow's metallics. Like, they're kind of like that high shine quality that I absolutely love, because I'm always looking for the next best shimmer, you guys. But this palette is so good. And I find that these mattes, even though there's only 7 mattes in here, people are right about the way that you use this palette, is that the mattes just set up how beautiful the shimmers are on your lids. The reason why I'm ranking this one at number 7 is that the shimmers are so metallic that they can transfer quite a bit, but they don't like transfer completely off your lid. Like, your eyes still look beautiful by the end of the day. The metallics in here, oh my god, are so insane. Insane how stunning they are. Yes. Okay, so I had to go eat dinner because my mom was making lobster and I was starving because I spent the day at the bank today taking care of all of my card stuff that was going on with that. So I killed like half my day. I thought I was only going to be there like an hour and I was going to go get my nails done after that, but then I was at the bank for a while. So yeah. So now I'm finally filming this video, but I got hungry, so yeah. So anyway, let's talk about the Glaminatrix Nearly Natural palette. So yeah, the metallics are super shiny and beautiful in here, and the mattes in here perform so easily, and they're just like an easy matte formula that you can rely on. They're not like the best mattes I've ever used in my life, but they're good, and they perform really well, and they're pigmented, but like they're very buildable. And they're kind of a little bit more soft because they just want to show off the metallics. The formula in here is gorgeous. There is not one dud shade in here. Every shade is wonderful, and I love this palette. So it's definitely one of my most used palettes this year as well. I think this is my most used palette besides my number 1 palette and my number 3 palette. But this one definitely got a lot of love from me, especially when I was in class. I would use this palette like almost every time I had class because I was just obsessed with the shimmers. So I think my favorite shade in here is, I mean, they're all so stunning. It's hard to pick a favorite shimmer in here, but I think my favorite shimmer is the shade Naked Eye, because this is just such a stunning, like, metallic-y, champagne-y shade. It is so gorgeous. It's super, super sparkly, and that's what Glaminatrix is known for. Like, can you see how beautiful that is? So I absolutely Love this palette, but again, the shimmers do transfer quite a bit. I am gonna just swatch another shade for you guys because, again, these metallics are so beautiful. So I just want to show you guys why Glaminatrix is so hyped, because their metallics are just insanely beautiful. So that is the shade Naked Eye, and this is the shade Exposed. So yeah, I really have been enjoying this palette. I haven't used it in a while though. Oh my god, I'm just all over the place. I'm so exhausted, you guys, so hopefully I can finish this video soon. I was really hoping to film this earlier in the day, but yeah, this is a wonderful palette. I love that the mattes coincide with the shimmers so well. We have like these two neutral browns. We have the green to go with the green shimmer, and then we have like these deeper, darker shades. I kind of love that we have two different deepening options. So then we don't have to use the same shade to deepen up, and also it's a little bit cooler, so you can use it with like the cooler tone shimmers, and then you have the warmer tone mattes, and then you have this pink shade that goes really nicely with any of these shimmers. It's just gorgeous. Love the color story, love the quality, and this palette is stunning. So, and actually the artwork was designed or inspired, well, I think that she did like the logo for Glaminatrix. This was Doodles by the Bunny. So that was really cool. So that one is number 7. Number 7. So now we're getting into number 6. And honestly, like number 7 through number 1 were very hard for me to figure out where to place, but I feel very comfortable with placing this one here. So number 6 is the only other new brand to me besides my number 1 palette, if you guys can guess which one that is. But this one I fell in love so hard and so fast because this palette is wonderful. So number 6 is the Simply Posh Citrus Punch palette. I wasn't sure if I was going to get this palette. I mean, that's how I feel about every palette. I mean, we kind of just like debate on and on, back and forth about whether or not we want to purchase a palette or not, because I've been trying to do that more often and not just purchase it unless it's a Nomad palette, because apparently I can't help myself. But I just saw that Annette's Makeup Corner was raving about this brand and raving about their formula, so I decided to try it myself, and this formula is wonderful. The mattes are so smooth and easy to blend, and they're so buildable, but they look so gorgeous on the eyes, and every single time I do my makeup with these, they just look so beautiful. You don't think they're gonna be as punchy and as pretty and pigmented as they are, but when you put them on, like even like these lighter tone, mid-tone kind of matte shades are so vibrant on the eyes. And then the shimmers are wonderful, so beautiful, so stunning. All of them are duochrome shimmers, and they're just so smooth and metallic, and they really don't transfer that much because they have kind of a little, not a drier formula, but a very solid shimmer formula where it really does not transfer, and it's not like super wet like the Glaminatrix shimmers are, but they are still beautiful and sparkly and so pretty on the lids. And then all of these like deepening shades on the bottom, like we have these two deepening shades and then the deep green. They are so stunning. Like, I'm just obsessed with this palette. I love the quality. I've been using this palette quite a bit this summertime, and I love it, and I can't wait to dip into it again. It's just so good. Like, all of these palettes, like, here on out, I cannot wait to use again, like especially my top 4. So yeah, I'm obsessed with this palette. So it's just really beautiful quality. I really can't ask for anything more. So my favorite shade in the palette is the shade Sour, and this shade is like a green to pink, and it kind of has a little bit of a gold flip to it as well. It's not gonna do it justice, and plus like I have the two Glaminatrix shades underneath, so those are pretty metallic, but it's just so stunning on the lid. I really want to use it again because I've only used it once. Obviously I had some other palettes to test and talk about in this video that I got in the month of June. But it is so gorgeous. I have to swatch at least one other metallic shade. I just wore this shade 2 days ago. This one's the shade Tropical. And this one is such a stunning, like, orangey pink shade. It is so, so pretty. They show up even more like duochromy and metallic on your lid. When you swatch them, they're not as like, oh my god, beautiful, but the mattes are so wonderful in this palette. I really do love the mattes in here. And this palette excites me because it's not like super colorful, but it's also not super neutral. I think that anyone could wear this palette. Colorful lovers or people that want to dip into or start trying color, I think that this is a really good palette to start with because they're still like kind of neutral-ish colors that you can, or you can just use this as a companion palette to add a pop of color to your look. Like you can just add this on the lower lash line, or you can pop one of these on the inner corners, or you can just throw this on over a shimmer. They're just so beautiful, but they're so subtle and easy to work with that they're not intimidating colors, formula-wise and also color story-wise. So I am absolutely obsessed with this palette. I love this deepening shade down here. I love this green. I just want to swatch at least one matte for you guys because they are such good quality. It's so super smooth and beautiful. I really try to only swatch like one shade for you guys, but apparently I can't help myself. But it's just, they're such beautifully smooth, buttery mattes. So I'm just absolutely obsessed with the quality of this. And if you have been wanting to try Simply Posh, I highly suggest that you do because the quality is there, believe me. Like, it's just such an easy palette to work with. I absolutely love this palette. So, all right, now let's get into the top 5. There's 3 brands in the top 5. So 2 out of the 3 brands are all repeat purchases of my favorite eyeshadow brands, but they knocked it out of the park with these palettes. Park. So number 5 is a Nomad palette, and number 5 is the Nomad Verona Amor y Muerte palette. Did I say that right? Yeah. So this is their first release of the year, and this is their Romeo and Juliet palette. Let me not die. And, excuse me, originally I wasn't going to pick up this palette like I am about every single palette apparently this year. And I love the packaging of this. This is actually my favorite packaging that Nomad has ever done. But this is what the color story looks like. And as soon as I saw this revealed, because I did see like the full color story, not in the actual palette, because Nomad does that a lot, where before they release the layout and the color story and everything, they always like tease like the single shades first and then they reveal the color story. But this palette is just so gorgeous, and I felt like you're getting 2 color stories in one, but they work so beautifully together as well. It's such a stunning palette, you guys. I actually don't mind the shimmers in here. A lot of people were saying that these were very hard pressed, but I think that these shimmers are way better quality than the shimmers that are in the Okavango Safari palette, because these are so stunning. They're kind of all like kind of a duochromy kind of shift to them, and they're super sparkly and so stunning on the lid. And even though I ended up intentionally buying this palette for the pink side, because I was like, oh my god, it's actually a pink red color story that I can get down with. And this was also Nomad's Valentine's Day release, like the Flirty Talk palette was for ColourPop, and they were both coming out with color stories of pink that I was really, really into. But I prefer the contrast of the pinks in the Flirty Talk palette over the pinks in this palette, because these pinks kind of all end up looking the same on the eyes, but they're so pigmented and easy to work with that you really don't care, because it always looks like it's always a beautiful look. I actually prefer the red variation on this side as compared to the pink, but this side I freaking love. I might actually love this side more than this side because the shimmers on this side are so gorgeous, and these deep dark mattes are so beautiful on the eyes. I actually think I might like this blue from this palette more so than the one in the Whistler Snow Lodge palette. I still love that shade, but this one is like super pigmented. And again, these are so easy to work with because they're so easy and blendable. And I love this palette. So my favorite shade is the shade Juliet. And with this shade, it really doesn't show up that much on your on a swatch, but when you put it on the eyes, this shade is such a like mysterious, beautiful shimmer because it shifts from blue to purple on your lids. So, but it doesn't really show the shift when you swatch it because I didn't notice the shift until I wore it on my lids for the first time, and I caught a glimpse of it in the mirror at work. And I kind of went like this to see what it looked like after like a couple of hours because I always check to see how the shadows hold up so I can tell you guys how they hold up. And you can see like the purple to blue shift on your lids. It's so stunning. So yeah, this isn't really going to do it justice, but I love it. And then the shade Tragedy is also one of my favorites in this palette because it's like a purple, silvery, pinkish kind of purpley. It's like a black based purple, and it's so freaking stunning. The first impressions look that I did with this palette was with the purples. Oh my god, it was such a gorgeous look. I just used these three shades and the black on the outer corners and then this on the inner corners, and it was so gorgeous. So yeah, I love this palette, and this red shimmer is gorgeous. These pinky shades are gorgeous. So is this shade Moors, but the mattes are so good too. But I'm not going to swatch everything because we'll be here forever. But I just wanted to say that they killed it with this release, and they smashed it out of the park with their first release of the year. Because I think this palette is beautiful. I don't have any issues with the shimmers. I actually prefer when they're a little bit more bindy, but I don't have any trouble picking these up. And they're not as dry feeling as the ones in the Akavango Safari palette. And I think that these shimmers are way more unique and special. So that one is number 5. Okay, number 4 is the last Nomad palette that came out, well, that I have to talk about. And also the second palette that they came out with this year. But oh my god, they smashed it with this palette. Like, I loved the Verona palette so much, but this palette is their best quality that they've ever done. Insanely amazing. So this is the number 4 is the Nomad Royal Europe palette. Now, what's funny is that I don't love the packaging of this one as much as I love the packaging of the Verona palette. But the pigmentation and the color story and everything about this palette is insanely beautiful quality. These mattes, oh my god, so ridiculously pigmented, but they are so smooth and easy to work with. Like, they are pigmented, so you really don't need that much when you apply them, but holy crap, they are so opaque and so pigmented, you like really don't have to build them up that much. And these multi-chromes, holy crap, they are so freaking gorgeous on the lids. They are so smooth, so metallic. Absolutely love these shades. So I'm in love with this palette. And the lasting power, you don't have to do anything to touch these up. They last so long on the eyes. The mattes are just as pigmented and intense as when you first put them on, than when you 8 hours later, when you check your makeup 8 hours later to take your makeup off at night. They are still insanely pigmented and they last so long. And the shimmers, again, are so freaking stunning. So my favorite shade in the palette is the shade Royal Treasure because it's such a, again, like mysterious, unique, beautiful shift to it. It's like red, gold to green. It's so stunning. But again, it's so ridiculously smooth and I just love it. It's so gorgeous. It kind of shifts a little bit more gold on your eyes as well. Like, I'm not even picking it up on camera, but it is so freaking stunning. And then I have to show you at least one of the matte shades. It's insane how pigmented they are. That's the shade Pen Palace, but look at how smooth that swatch is. I'm obsessed with this palette. Every time I use this palette, I absolutely love my look. And I thought that with the mattes, I was going to be a little bit more limited with the color selection, because I was like, oh, there's not really that many deepening shades in here. Do not need to pull from any other palette. I mean, I did combine, I can't remember what other palette I combined with this palette. I think it might have been the Hudson Valley palette. I combined that with these, and that was really pretty. But like, honestly, this brown shade is so super dark. It deepens up the looks so much that like I really don't need another shade. And then this shade also deepens up the look beautifully. The blues and the greens and the purples and the reds are so pigmented. I love this palette so much. They smashed it with this. And as soon as I read the price of this for multi-chromes, I'm like, I absolutely need this, because I don't own any multi-chromes except for like one shade in the singular multi-chromes that are in the Odin's Eye palettes that I have, and the next palette I'm going to talk about. But to have 5 multi-chromes in this palette for like $50-something is like unheard of, because multi-chromes are so expensive to make. These are stunning. Nomad did such an amazing job with this palette. I absolutely love it. Okay, let's get into the top 3. So, Natasha, you did it this year, okay? But this was actually the last palette that I tried in the year of 2022, I believe. I think I tried it the last week of December, but I had not tried it out fully. So technically I tried 13 palettes in 2023, not 14, because again, I think this is the last palette that I tried in 2022. So I did not have time to put it in my rankings for 2022. So I'm ranking it now, but it definitely fell really, really high, and I love this palette. So this one is number 3, and it is the Natasha Denona My Dream palette. Oh my god, you guys. I fell hard for this palette. I think this was my favorite Natasha Denona palette, because I love my previous 3 palettes. I love the retro palette. I love the gold palette. I love the sunrise palette. But it was just the range of depth and dimension that she offered in this palette with the mattes and the range of shimmers in here. Like, this is a interesting neutral palette to me, because you have purples, you have warm tones, and you have these insanely gorgeous shimmers. This palette is so beautiful, you guys, and I think out of all the palettes that I've worn this year, I have gotten the most compliments when I wear this palette. It's so weird. Like, I'm like, I like don't even do much, but like Natasha Denona's eyeshadows just look so gorgeous on the eyes. There's just something about her formula that just makes your eyes look so stunning. I just love this palette. I love how deep and dark you can go with the brown and the black, and then this deep dark purple, and then these mid-toned warm tones, and then these super sparkly opaque shimmers. She just did the damn thing with this palette, and I absolutely love it. I've reached for this a ton. The only shade I haven't used twice in here is Serenity. So, yeah, I'm obsessed with this palette. I think it's gorgeous. And my favorite shade is the multi-chrome in here, which is the shade Vision. Oh my god, this shade is so stunning. And honestly, it's kind of similar feeling and quality to the Nomad shimmers and multi-chromes. They feel like almost exactly the same. So that one is the shade Vision. I just want to see. Yeah, the Nomad one is definitely more red-based. But it's such a gorgeous, gorgeous shade. And then the other shade, Invention, is like a tangerine, sparkly shimmer. And it's so gorgeous. Oh my god, I love it so much. So yeah, I'm obsessed with this palette. I've worn this a ton for a lot of special occasions this year, and I just love it. I think it's such a beautiful, deep, sultry, sexy palette. And I think anyone that wears this it really does work for everyone, and I just really prefer Natasha Denona's color stories over any other like luxury brand because that's what she really thinks about. And also I think that the Natasha Denona mini palettes are definitely the best bang for your buck when it comes to high-end luxury palettes because I think that you really are paying for the quality. And also, since there was a multi-chrome in here, I think this was the first palette that she raised to $69. But I kind of understood that because you have a multi-chrome, but you also have 15 shades. So I think that's a really good price, especially if you get it during like the Sephora VIB sale. You're getting 20% off. So, okay, number 2 is one of the most recent palettes I've added to my collection. But from the first time that I tried this palette, I fell absolutely head over heels for this one. I think this might be my favorite Natasha Denona palette in my collection. So number 2 is the Natasha Denona Yucca palette. I love this palette so much, you guys. It is such a beautiful palette, and I love the outer packaging. I just absolutely love the shimmers in this palette, and the mattes are so smooth and buttery. I actually think the mattes in here are smoother than the ones in the My Dream palette. I still love the My Dream palette, but these are just super buttery smooth. The only shade that I wish had a little bit more pigmentation to it is this like forest green shade. But it is a cream to powder, but it does build up really beautifully. And also, if you want to use it as a deepening shade, you don't have to worry about fallout because it's a cream to powder. So, like, you're not going to get that ridiculous amount of fallout when you try to blend it out on your outer corners. So, but oh my god, the shimmers in here are insane on how sparkly and stunning that they are. And I just, as soon as I saw this color story revealed, I'm like, that's mine. I'm like, I love these kind of tones, like greenish, mustardy, orangey tones with these insanely intense, sparkly shimmers. The shimmers in here are so gorgeous. So my favorite shade is the shade Kamarabi. Oh, they are so metallic and beautiful. Like, these are some of her best shimmers that she's ever done. But they're insane how sparkly they are. So that one is the shade Kamarabi. Like, I would compare these to, like, the sparkliness of Glaminatrix. Because that's how, like, super stunning they are. And then I'm just going to swatch the shade Makia because I love this shade, too. I really love Plantasia, too. But these two, because, like, everybody's raving about that shade. But these two are just insanely sparkly. I love both of them. But look at that. Aren't those fucking gorgeous? Like, I'm obsessed with this palette, and I cannot wait to do more looks with it again because I just tested out all of the shimmers like a couple of days ago, and I haven't used the palette since then, but I am looking forward to using this palette so much in the next couple of months, and it's just such a gorgeous palette, and the mattes perform so well, so easily, and compared to the quality of the Nomad Safari palette, I just think that the quality of the Natasha Denona is so much better, and it just blends a lot better. But yeah, I wouldn't steer you away from the Nomad palette if you guys like that color story more. This is a little bit more grungy toned, but I do not think that they're dupes for each other whatsoever, because I compared both of the palettes, and I think I'm going to do a comparison video for you guys, and do Natasha Denona on one side, and then do the Nomad on the other side so you guys can see. But I am wearing the Nomad palette today, but I don't think any of the shades are exact dupes for each other. Some of the mattes might be a little bit more similar, but all of the shimmer shades are different in both palettes. So I found that it was justifiable for me to own both palettes because they're both very different vibes, even though they are different color stories. I don't think if you own both that you're going to be upset that you own both. And also, they're two completely different formulas as well. But Natasha Denona just knocked it out of the park with this palette, and I think it's absolutely stunning, and I just love it. And the mattes are so easy to use, so easily blendable, but there is only one deepening matte in here. But honestly, it's so pigmented that I don't really need anything else because the matte selection is so beautiful in here. The only shade I haven't used in here is this shade Camu Camu. but I'm definitely going to use it soon. Like, look at that pigmentation. It's so gorgeous, right? I love it. That's insane. It's right there. I need to use that shade. But yeah, absolutely love it. I'm sorry if I haven't used one shade, but I could tell you guys that the quality of this is top notch. Probably her best quality she's ever done. All right, number one. Can you guys guess what number one is? Oh my God. So this palette, I did not get myself. My dear friend Kat sent this to me, and I have not been able to put this palette down. Well, I obviously have been using different palettes lately, but this palette is so good. And I understand why this brand sells out every time they release a new palette. I'm like, is the hype really that real? Yeah, it really is. Everybody loves their quality. So number one, drumroll please, is the Cosmic Brushes Muse palette. I knew that this palette was going to be number one because, not just because like I try to rank a different palette besides ColourPop in my number ones, but honestly, this blew every other palette out of the water this year. The quality, the pigmentation, the ease of use, the color story, the price range, everything is so wonderful about this palette. I know people love the mattes in the Cosmic Brushes palette, but I am absolutely obsessed with the shimmers in here. The mattes are still amazing, and they blend so beautifully. I think I might even prefer the quality of this over Blend Bunny. The Blend Bunny All Done Up palette is still a really good palette, don't get me wrong, but I prefer the shimmers in here, even though those shimmers are so gorgeous, but these shimmers really don't transfer as much as the Blend Bunny or the Glaminatrix ones do. These shimmers are absolutely stunning. They are so metallic and smooth, but they glide on like a dream. And the mattes are just so rich and so easy to blend. And this palette's $20. $20. Like, you can't ask for anything more. And I love the range of depth that you get in this palette as far as the colors go. I love that you have a warm tone brown and a deep dark brown and a deep dark green. So you can deepen up the looks in a lot of different ways. And I love the range of colors in here, like this teal, this yellow, this pink, this lime green, and then the shimmers are so insanely stunning. But I love this palette. I don't know what else to say about it. It's absolutely stunning quality. And if you guys have not tried Cosmic Brushes yet, I highly suggest you do. I think that my favorite shade in the palette is the shade Patina, because this shade is such a stunning green. And it's right here. It doesn't really matter where you swatch them either, because they're going to show up insanely opaque every single time. It's just such a gorgeous, like, greenish gold. It's so beautiful. And my other favorite shimmer is the shade Muse, because it's such a stunning pinky gold shade. So that one is Muse right here. Oh my God. The quality and the smoothness of the shimmers, like, blew me away when I first used this palette. I knew from the first time that I used this, I was like, I love this formula. It's just so easy to work with, and I even think that the color stories that they come out with are so playful and fun, but also I feel like anyone could use these. Even like beginners might want to like try a color story like this, because again, it kind of makes color made easy kind of palettes. And I'll just swatch a couple of the mattes for you guys, but they're so insanely smooth. So that one is Novu, and that one is Admire. Do you see that pigmentation? Do you see that? I'm pretty sure you do. And the shade Water Lily is such a gorgeous lime. Oh my God, that is a look right there. I really want to try this color combo for summer, green with yellow. I haven't really done that, and it's just stunning. Stunning quality. Absolutely love it. I am so glad Kat got this palette for me. I got her the Nomad Verona palette, And she also picked up this palette herself and we did a live together. And I'm just so obsessed with the quality. Also, the colors go together so well that if you're like hesitant to put a color combo together, but I tried the yellow with like the green and I think like the purple, and it just, they blend so well that you think like, oh, these colors aren't really going to go that well together. They go together so beautifully. I was blown away. I love like the minty green. I love like these different shades of green, the pink shades. The only thing is that I wish that there was like kind of like a lilac-y purple in here, or like kind of like a deeper purple, because the only shade I really didn't end up using too much was the shade Willow, but then I finally used this shade like a month ago, and it's like a greenish, like really pretty like neutrally green. And then this shade Ambient is such a stunning shade. I just love this palette, and I love how you have a couple of neutrals in here. And this shade Luster, oh my god, I've used this as a face highlight before. It is such a beautiful like duochrome kind of shimmer. It has like purple and pink in it. It's so stunning. I use it on my inner corners all the time. So yeah, I could not rave about this palette enough. It is absolutely stunning. I also love the purple shimmers in here as well, like the shade Whisper. It is so gorgeous. I absolutely love this palette, and I could not stress enough, if you guys were trying to get your hands on cosmic brushes, they sell out for a reason, so you need to be on the website as soon as they hit the website. So yeah, that is it, you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe. Follow me on Instagram at CBW819, and check out my Poshmark at the same handle. And I hope you guys enjoyed this countdown. Let me know if you guys have tried any of these palettes. I really would love to know. What are your thoughts on my rankings? But really, the top 5 palettes really blew me away this year. So yeah, I love you guys, and I will talk to you guys later, and have a great day. Bye.